The first JJ Abrams Star Trek movie was a real surprise for me. I have to say that it was one of my favourite films of that year. Was it 2009, I believe it came out? So I was very much looking forward to the sequel, Into Darkness. Now, what I want to say about this movie is that I can't really go into the plot without spoiling it for those who haven't seen it already. So I'm going to avoid spoilers and I will not be discussing the plot in this video. So if you haven't seen the movie, you're safe to carry on watching. So essentially, it picks up where the last Star Trek left off, and we follow the adventures of Captain Kirk, played by Chris Pine, and his first commander Spock, played by Zachary Quinto. You also have like Carl Urban as Bones and Zoe Saldana as Uhura. The cast that was established in the first film, you know, they absolutely shine as much as they did in that movie. In this film, they essentially settle into their roles. The dynamic is already established so that we don't have to spend a lot of screen time, you know, establishing any further dynamics between the characters. That's already there, so we can launch straight into the action now. In the same way that Star Trek, the first JJ Abrams movie, started with a big action scene, so does this one, where they're essentially trying to stop a volcano from erupting on an alien planet. So straight away we're into the action, and we have all the usual JJ Abrams tropes. You know, it's very fast-paced action, but they manage to add enough sort of the characters' individualities into the action scenes and in how the characters react to certain situations that makes it interesting for the audience. Now, the film is called Into Darkness, and I will say that one thing that had me a bit worried about this movie is the fact that I thought they were going to try and go all dark and gritty with it. Every film that comes out now, look at, you know, Man of Steel or basically any comic book movie, they all try to be dark and gritty, and I think that it's a shame really, because films should have their own individual personalities. But this film, regardless of its title and its trailer, is as bright, colourful, fun, funny and enjoyable and entertaining as the last one, and I think the title Into Darkness sort of does it a disservice, and you should adjust your expectations accordingly. It is just as bright and colourful as the last one, so that was a nice surprise. We have essentially Benedict Cumberbatch playing the villain, John Harrison, who essentially exists to ruin Kirk and Spock's day, but I'm not going to go any more into his character because that's the major spoiler of the plot. I will say this, Benedict Cumberbatch is awesome in this film. He's obviously trained in both sort of adapting his body to the action requirements, but also in combat training, and he's really good. He's obviously committed to this role, and he does a great job with it. Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, their chemistry is brilliant. The Star Trek films are essentially a bromance between Kirk and Spock, and JJ Abrams has the good sense to keep the focus on that bromance. Spock is given, to be honest, I felt that this film was Spock's movie. They established in the first film that Spock is essentially the coffin nail of the Enterprise, not to be messed with, and Spock is given his chance to shine and have a lot more action scenes in this film, and I think the film's better for it. I really loved seeing Zachary Quinto's Spock get to do a lot more this time around, and to get to deepen his character and his relationship with Zoe Saldana's Uhura. So that was a pleasant surprise. This film, to be honest, it's everything a summer sci-fi blockbuster should be. There's enough of a plot in there to keep you interested. The action scenes are very well paced. The film as a whole is well paced. It's not an overload of action. Man of Steel looking in your direction. The action is divided up by great character moments, great dynamics. There are a couple of sort of questionable scenes, such as Alice Eve stripping off, which felt really out of place. Not that I'm against that sort of thing, but it just felt really out of place and shoehorned in. So that's a criticism. I think that shot appears in the trailer, so that's not really a spoiler. And also, given where they go with the villain in this movie and the plot, it essentially retreads a previous Star Trek adventure in a sense, and I do feel like the film so far, this film series, is a slave to what has happened before. Given that they reboot the franchise and have a new timeline completely in the first JJ Abrams Star Trek movie, that essentially gives them free rein to do what they want with the plot, with the characters, because it's an alternate timeline. But I do feel like they are still a slave to the original franchise that appeared, franchise of movies that is, that appeared, 20, 30 years ago. Star Trek is supposed to be about boldly going where no man has gone before, and I don't feel like the filmmakers are doing that. While I do, don't get me wrong, I love the first Star Trek movie and I really like the second, I do feel like they haven't done enough different from the original series of movies to really set it apart. I would like to see in the third film, should JJ Abrams return after doing Star Wars Episode 7, I would like to see him take the franchise in a completely different direction and do something that has no relation whatsoever to the previous films, and to make the franchise his own. Stylistically, you have all the JJ Abrams ticks. The lens flare does overload now and again, and sometimes it can be a little bit distracting, but for the most part it doesn't bother me. You also have a couple of additions to the cast as well as Benedict Cumberbatch. You have Peter Weller, RoboCop, in this movie as well, and it was just great to see RoboCop on screen again. Peter Weller is a great actor, and it was really nice to see him in a Star Trek movie, and another big, summer blockbuster. Peter Weller hasn't been in this type of movie for a lot of years, so, it was really fun to see him again. And really, the plot, while the film is good and I enjoyed it from beginning to end, and I watched most of it, with a big smile on my face, and I did really like it, it does feel to a certain extent a little bit disposable. Like, you're probably not going to be thinking about it very much once you've left the theatre, but it is something that you will re-watch because it's fun and it's sort of light and fluffy and full of action. So, like I say, my criticism is I want to see them do something different next time around rather than retread what has already happened in previous Star Trek adventures. But don't get me wrong, I enjoyed this movie, and for anybody who enjoyed the first Abrams movie or previous Star Trek adventures, I think you'll enjoy this. Star Trek fanboys will probably be a little bit annoyed at some of the plot twists and turns, but to be honest, if you don't like it, go back and watch the originals. But like I say, it's not perfect. It's a perfectly serviceable summer blockbuster action sci-fi movie with great characters that you actually like, charismatic actors, great action sequences, it's well paced, and it's a fun night at the cinema. So Star Trek Into Darkness I would definitely recommend.